Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Robust Opposition. With me is my special guest, Andrew Fletcher, who is a candidate for Asheville City Council here in Asheville, North Carolina, where I moved a year ago. And Andrew gets to be the first candidate that I interview in a series of interviews with local candidates. I won't be able to interview them all, but I'm definitely going to be interviewing the most progressive ones. And being that Andrew is a fellow Bernie Sanders supporter, I knew that he had to be the first one. So how you doing tonight, Andrew?
Oh, I'm doing great. Been working on the campaign all day, and nice to sit down and talk with you.
That's great. Well, let's get right into it. When I interview candidates, I always like to ask them about their backgrounds, their childhoods. And I read that you were a Jehovah's Witness. Tell the viewers what your childhood was like and how being a Jehovah's Witness affected your view of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And while I no longer worship that way, I want to say that first off, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I was homeschooled all but second grade, and my first 12 years were spent in Michigan, and where my family had a small farm. We had about 120 chickens and a couple horses and a dozen goats and some turkeys and some peacocks that ran away and after 2 weeks. And So I had a real idyllic childhood, and I recognize that it was in rural Michigan. My family moved from there to Tryon, North Carolina, in 1995. And in when I was in Tryon as a Jehovah's Witness, I did a heck of a lot of door-to-door ministry, as you have, as I'm sure everyone's had witnesses knock on their doors before. I did a lot of that. So canvassing comes naturally in the campaign, I should say. But I was also trained as a speaker and someone who could reason from a text. In that case, the text was the Bible. But those skills, being able to do analysis of a text, being able to talk to people about something that you're passionate about, and trying to get them to understand things in a way that you do, or at least to find common ground, is very, very foundational to me. And really what that was a sense of public service, as in a sense that if you can help people, you should be helping people. As I got older and I found my own way in life, I needed a place to put that foundation of mine. When I started working as an organizer, and I saw the difference that I could make, then it was a greatly satisfying thing for me to be able to carry what I learned as a child in a way that honored who I had become as an adult.
Okay. Now, I billed you in this show as a musician and an organizer, but I just found out just a few minutes ago that you didn't become a musician right after high school. You became a musician at age 27. What did you do after high school? You didn't go to college, right? You're in college now.
No, I'm in college now. Due to due to my upbringing, my parents had no interest in preparing me for college. And so they prepared me for the ministry. And so when I left my family, and I moved out on my own, I found myself really unable to get into college because I had no paperwork, I had no preparation, I had a lot of things to figure out on my own without the benefit of a high school diploma, a high school transcript, on all those types of things. So I was late to start that whole process, and I worked at a newspaper. I learned graphic design, and I continued learning music as just a fan of music, and I had a very good mentor. And in 2010, I'd lost in the recession. I'd lost a very promising job here in Asheville, working in marketing, and I thought I was going to go a long way with that. And then that didn't work out, and I played music a lot for a few months, and I achieved fluency in music in a matter of few months after playing since I was 10. And then a great job in the music world came up. the piano player for the Firecracker Jazz Band. I was hired by them, and I've been with them for 12 years now, and that really changed the course of my life. I didn't intend to, like a lot of musicians, it's their dream as to what they want to do. I found myself doing it because I loved it, and it was the most valuable thing I could do in 2010. But I've kept up with it, and it's been a very satisfying job for me, if a frustrating one on the, as the life of an artist is, it may not be a big life, but it sure is a rich life.
Yeah. Now, I read in a profile of you that you were a busker,
Mm-hmm.
and that being a busker accidentally got you into politics. Talk about that.
Well, I think this was 2014. The city made a proposal to change the rules around busking, and busking is super valuable to me as a musician. I got to say, it was awesome. If I didn't have a gig, I could go out on the streets and make a gig, and so it helped me fill up my life with. It helped me enable me turn music into income, and even early in my career. And so I was the guy that would put a piano in the back of a truck and drive it downtown and unload it and play. So I played the last couple bell shares. I did a heck of a lot of busking the first few years of my career. When the city wanted to really crush the busking scene with some draconian rules that they'd cherry picked from other cities who had also wrecked their busking scenes, I helped organize the Asheville Buskers Collective. And in the next year of tangling with the city, I proved to myself that you can fight City Hall and win. We got to a good result on that, and now the threat to busking we see out there isn't city rules; it's issues that are affecting a lot more of us, like affordable housing.
Yeah. Now, I've interviewed a lot of Berniecrats that start with Congress, and I always have to ask them, why are you starting with the federal office? Why don't you get some experience in a local office? Here you are going for the local office, but you actually have experience for the local office. You've been involved in different boards and commissions. Talk about your background on those, and of which accomplishments there are you most proud? Or was the Busker Ordinance the one?
Well, it was after the resolution of the fight with the city over the busking laws that I was first. I think people kind of could see the ability that I was bringing to the table. Again, I was with the training I received as a child. It gave me a real ability to do public speaking, and to a real ability to sit at a table and find the nearest common ground. And it turns out these are very useful political skills. And so the first appointed job I had with the city as a volunteer was on the Haywood Page Advisory Task Force, which longtime locals will know as the Pit of Despair. And I walked in there as a fresh face, and there was a lot of, excuse me, there was a lot of very hardened opinions on this issue. And the 17-member task force certainly came in with 17 opinions. And due to a marathon effort on my part and others, we took 17 opinions and turned them into one unanimous vote at the end of that. Which I'm very proud of that work. And we really slayed the dragon that had dogged the city for a long time. And after that, I was appointed to I applied and was appointed to the Public Art and Cultural Commission, which as a musician and busker, I felt was a very good fit for me. And after that, I was appointed to the City of Asheville's Downtown Commission. So now I've got 7 years experience working in City Hall, working in the sausage factory, making policy, fighting policy, slowing down policy, whatever it takes policy. And I'm now the vice chair of the Downtown Commission and the Public Art and Cultural Commission, and I really enjoy my work there. And I wouldn't be ready to go to the next level at City Council if I hadn't spent that time.
Well, I would say that you're amply qualified. You made a point that I think is really interesting, and it's one that I always answer when people say, "Oh, Lauren, you should run for public office," and I always say, "No," because when you run for public office, you have to compromise. I like being an activist where I can take my extreme position and really advocate for it. And I watched you last year with the noise ordinance. You might want to talk to people about that, because there's two sides to that issue. And I watched you successfully navigate that to what I thought was a really decent compromise. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, that was a very difficult issue. First off, it was clear to me that a new noise ordinance was going to happen. There were some real concerns about major industrial players, construction noise, some things. There was some really some big money had been bad neighbors, and people had really rallied to try and solve those things. When you looked at the actual complaints, music complaints were ninth on the list. So what I knew was that we could be affected by this, and so that we had to make sure that we were at the table, because I was told a long time ago, and I believe it's true: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we mainly through the Asheville Music Professionals, where I've served as a board member. Our other board members really led the negotiations with the neighborhoods, trying to figure out what was going to work, what was going to be sustainable for the music scene, what was going to give satisfaction to the neighbors who are experiencing a lot of this noise, and but really allow the music to continue. And at the end of that process, when it was coming up for the final vote at City Council, this is back in July of 2021. I was the sort of the tip of the spear for my entire industry, and represented Asheville Music Professionals, who were representing the broader music industry, to City Council, and gave a presentation to them. Now, it didn't look like, I know you might look at this and think, well, the vote didn't go our way, but we did very well. We got the silver medal. We did not lose, and I'm very proud of that. And in fact, just on Thursday, my work continues with that. The Asheville Music Professionals is hosting an educational meeting with the venue owners who could be affected, to really to try to make sure that we've got a good relationship with the city, that the music is going to be able to continue, and that we're going to all be acting in a way that does not generate complaints or bad blood with our neighbors. Yeah. So I was really proud of the work that we were able to do together. And it was fun, because a lot of the people in the music industry know me as a musician. They know me as a piano player, and they hadn't seen the other hat that I wear, which is being able to go up and speak on behalf of a cause, and being able to strategically and tactically navigate policy issues. And I was really glad I got to show them what I'm capable of, because they've been very, very supportive of my campaign. And if we have to work together, I obviously need my base if I'm going to win.
Yeah. I was reading about that interview that you sent me with your fellow musician. You two organized a concert for Bernie in 2020. And of course, you don't read this type of thing in Los Angeles, where I'm from, but in that interview, he mentioned how a lot of his fans were conservatives, and they put like ha emojis when he was announcing that he was doing this thing for Bernie. And I'm kind of wondering, you bring people in. The function of art is to bring people in. And I'm of the age, when my musicians were very political. Now they kind of shy away from politics, with the rare exceptions who we all know. How do you see the role of art and music specifically in bringing people in, like you say, to your campaign, and generally to being more active citizens in their democracy?
That's a great question. So first off, musicians have politics whether they display them or not. And in Asheville, especially there's of course different pieces of the music industry. A lot of what I do in music is music as a service. I'm a jazz musician, so I'm playing events and things like that. I don't have a big following of devoted fans that are following my original music. My job in the music business is to make sure that people are having a good time and that they're listening to good music. The artistic side of it for me does not come into play as much, but the music industry has a lot of different factors. For my partner in that event, Andrew Fletcher, he is a very talented guitar player. I don't play guitar. And he is a very talented guitar player and songwriter and band leader and organizer. And he, he had to make a conscious choice about displaying that. And I've known, I've known some musicians to want to hold back or just not be sure. But I think that, just as in the times of the 60s and 70s where music was very politically oriented, even, huge bands like Creedence Clearwater Revival, making big statements. We're just now overcoming some of like the lesson that was unfortunately gleaned from what happened with the Dixie Chicks, or now just the Chicks, when they spoke against the war in Iraq. So it's a very, very complex issue, and I know that it's hard to be a musician. It's hard to make your way through life as an artist, and you don't want to alienate people. So I respect people who want to make who feel like they can't speak out. I'll still encourage them to do so. But it's one of my idols is Nina Simone, and if she had just wanted to be an amazing singer and musician and not let her politics and not bring her full experience as a Black woman in America to her music, it's doubtless that she would have sold more records.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, but in her case, she made everlasting art that inspires me and many other people to this day. And that's the contribution that I'd ask my fellow musicians to make, is to make some everlasting art by displaying your true self in your real politics.
Yeah. I was asking more about how you bring in people through the art and then you expose them to the politics, and can that make them become better citizens? But we need to move on to talk about the issues because there's a lot of issues in Asheville. I've got some questions about ones that I think are crucial. But first, I want to ask you, what are the three problems? Let's put it this way. What are the three biggest problems you see in Asheville right now? And if you were to get onto the city council, how would you solve those problems?
Well, a huge problem right now is that the housing crisis here has, due to years of not taking the problem seriously, the housing issues in Asheville are just atrocious. It's bad everywhere in the country. I recognize that. Tourism in our local economy has compounded and amplified those issues here. So housing is a huge one. Another one is just workers issues. How I've seen again and again and again, our current leadership really not taking never asking the questions of how does this affect working people, and they underpay their own staff. If you look at how the city of Asheville pays their rank and file members, they get just very, very small raises, and management gets really big raises. So I really think that if you're going to be on council and you're going to try to represent workers, the most direct thing you can do is try to make sure that your city employees can afford to live in the city that they work in. And we just really haven't seen that out of the current leadership. And the third one I would say is definitely public safety. And public safety is unfortunately we've treated for decades now like the police are the only tool that we use for public safety. And there's been, in most states, mental health has been defunded, social work has been defunded for decades, and instead all those efforts have been focused on band-aids instead of long-term solutions. They've been focused on moving the problem around rather than safety nets to prevent people from falling that far from prosperity. And that again comes down to not caring about the working class or even anybody that is trying to get to the working class. So those are really the three things that I see. And I'm not just looking to put a Band-Aid on the problem and get reelected in 4 years. I think we've seen the 4-year political cycles be so important that no one is being visionary. No one's thinking about the very long term. solutions that might need to be funded that might pay off after the next election cycle. But I think if we're going to get serious about the problems that I've seen my entire life, we need to really be using some visionary thinking and start funding long-term solutions rather than Band-Aids.
Okay, well, I want to talk about those problems because I have questions for two of them. It's interesting, although I do agree that a living wage, which is $17.70 in Buncombe County, and the state minimum wage is no greater than the national, which is $7.25 an hour. People can't, one way is to make things cheaper, which is not happening now due to the inflation, which is we could do a whole show on why there's inflation. But the other is to pay people more. And didn't even think to ask you that because I just figured, that's set by the federal government, that's set by the state. But you gave a really good example of what the city can do in terms of paying its own workers. So I thank you for that because I hadn't thought of that. But I wanted to talk to you about housing because you might have been seeing me for the last year posting on Asheville Politics, which is a Facebook group, about social housing. I'm really a big proponent of social housing, which is like public housing, but it's not exactly because it's not the kind of projects that we've seen our government do in the past that have been such failures, which are rife for crime and drug abuse and all sorts of stuff like that. It's more like mixed income housing, mixed use housing, but it is fully paid for and run by the government. Now, the United States has consistently defunded public housing and even Section 8 over the last 40 years, favoring tax breaks and other incentives for developers, which in my opinion has not worked to provide what they call deeply affordable housing.
Yep.
I keep hearing, every time I turn on the city council meeting, that Asheville is not in a position to run permanent supportive housing for the homeless, much less deeply affordable housing. Do you agree with that position? Why or why not?
Now, I absolutely think that the existing programs to create affordable housing are broken and absolutely broken. And they have not had the effect on the housing market that has really made a difference. The problem continues while the solution shrinks. And, it's just not incentivizing private developers to start building what we need has not worked. And so when I look at housing issues and what the city can do, I see three things that the city can do that no private developer can possibly do. So the city can actually be incredibly competitive as far as how much it costs to build housing, which is then, of course, how much is it going to cost to run and rent. And those three things are: one, the city has a lot of land, right? So they already own the land. They don't need to buy land, and they own land in good places, and they're close to jobs and things like that. Two, they have an excellent credit rating. The one thing that I can say about our current leadership is they have got a AAA credit rating, and but they don't know how to use it. They're not using it for the right stuff. So if we want to borrow money to do this, it's going to be cheaper than any financing that a private developer can get.
Right.
Third, we have no profit motive. So if the public can build housing with no profit motive, free land that we already own as the public, that we own it, and with an excellent credit card to put it on, we can build housing cheaper than we can incentivize others to do it.
Yeah.
And so if you want to be responsible with taxpayer dollar, you want a solution that's going to be that can be replicated again and again to actually match the size of the problem we're experiencing. And I think this is what we have to do. Now, there's a lot of different, you're talking about social housing. There's a lot of different models that could follow after the three things that I mentioned. So I'm open to more than just the social housing model. I've seen some other ones where you take a third of the units in a building and you make the market rate, you make a third of them affordable, and you make a third of them deeply affordable. Yeah. It all balances out.
Right.
And the city can walk away from the management of it and turn it over to the tenants, deed restrict the units so they remain affordable in perpetuity. And then the city recovers its money, goes and does it again, helps more people, creates more housing.
Yeah.
That type of solution could be really powerful because it's not just a one-off.
Yeah.
But and I know what existing leadership is going to say is that, oh, the city should not be a developer.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the folks that say that, they come from the development industry. All their friends are the developers that make profit off of development.
Right.
While they may not have their hand in the brown paper bag, their friends are benefiting. Their industry is benefiting from development, and they don't care who benefits from the development.
Yeah.
As someone who cares about the public outcomes of decisions, not the private profits of land developers, I'm bringing a very, very different approach.
Yeah. No, I really like that idea. And, one other thing we could talk about, and then it's a whole nother show, and I've done other shows on this, is public banking. When the city is taking its tax revenues and putting it into a public bank, and it doesn't have to pay interest to Wall Street, it can take those profit or pays interest to itself. It takes those profits and plows it back into the community. Now, Asheville may be too small. Maybe it needs to be Buncombe County. I'd have to think a little bit more about this. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, why not? Just because the city hasn't, done it before, why can't they do it in the future? I mean, I was thinking about this when they were talking about the emergency shelter. And I'm going to ask you a specific question about the homeless in a second. But since this sort of relates to the housing, the Ramada Inn. So they were housing a lot of homeless people in the Ramada Inn. And there was a plan to turn that into an emergency shelter by the Anchor Collaborative. Have you heard of them? Did you ever see that plan? Because I'll tell you, Esther Mannheimer saw it, but I don't think anybody else in the council saw it. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, you'll have to catch me up.
All right. Well, there it is. They are a collaborative of, I think, 24 organizations that work with the homeless. And they researched exactly how they would be able to provide this emergency shelter at the Ramada Inn. And it never got a hearing because they thought it was in the bag that the city was going to vote to turn it into that. But their biggest advocate was Kathy Ball, who went to take a job as a city manager in another city. And the Anchor Collaborative never did politicking for their own proposal. They just thought it was in the bag. And the people who did the politicking were, they've become East Asheville Wellness and Safety, a group started by neighbors over there that didn't like it homeless. And I'll ask about that in the next question. But it kind of was funny to me that, they buckled under that political pressure, but then they decided, no, we're still going to have, we're going to use that because we have that. We have to decide right away whether we're going to go ahead with that purchase. We're going to turn it into permanent supportive housing, and we're going to bring Step Up on Second, which is a California-based organization. I know, I used to contribute to them, that provides permanent supportive housing for the homeless. We'll bring them in to run it. And people were saying, why do we have to bring in some out-of-state organization to run something when we have the expertise right here? And I knew we had the expertise right here because I read the Anchor Collaborative proposal. And similarly, they're hiring consultants. I just read in the paper last week with UNC Asheville, I think a $200,000 contract to do something similar to what you said, which is to take all the city-owned property and turn it into affordable housing. I'd like to know why they're always using consultants who are so expensive. Why don't they rely on their staff and their boards and commissions, which they're now trying to eliminate, most of them, to do this research and report back? What is your take on that?
Well, sort of the prophet in his homeland, if you know what I mean. It's I've seen this happen a lot. When I was fighting the city on busking, I couldn't get a meeting with the city. These people wouldn't talk to me. They were fighting me tooth and nail. During that time, the city manager for Fort Lauderdale, Florida, reached out to me to get my thoughts on how he could create a better busking environment in Florida. So I was considered an expert by city manager of 500,000 people in Fort Lauderdale. I'm not sure. And in a city of 90,000 people, I couldn't even get a meeting with the people who were trying to kill to kill the busking scene.
Yeah, well, that phrase that comes to mind with that one is a prophet is without honor in his own home.
That's the one. That's the one. So you lead me to get to say one of my taglines, which is community, not consultants. Community, we've got some skin in the game here. We definitely care about the outcome of what we're proposing. We're going to think deeply about how it's going to affect ourselves and our neighbors and our future and our kids. And that's a great place to come from as far as, when you're doing planning and proposals. What I've noticed with consultants is that they have sort of a buffet approach of consultants that are out there. And if you want a certain outcome to a consultant's report, you look at the previous reports the consultant has made,
Right.
and then you hire the one that you think is going to lead you to the place that you already want to go anyway. And so when I say community consultants, not consultants, that's what I mean. The people who actually have ownership and equity over the outcomes here need to be at the table and discussing this and be empowered. But right now the city is trying to get rid of all those boards and commissions, both of mine that I'm on. I think it's a real threat. The principles of democracy are not being guarded very well by our current leadership.
Yeah. Before we get back to the homeless question, this leads me to, you're talking about principles of democracy. We're talking about accessibility, transparency. There's been a lot of issues with people with public comment, with being able to get the mayor, for instance, to return a call. I never see her commenting in any of these Facebook groups. She's not that accessible. Certain other council people are. And it almost feels like she's hiding from the people. What is your take on that?
My take is that the public's business should be done in public. And I can elaborate, but I think it's very simple. This is a principle that I've seen work. When the city has done well, it is when they've listened. It's when they've done things in an open process. And when it's come back to bite them, is when they've tried to do this stuff behind closed doors. And now they may be technically legal in how they are doing this. In some cases, they are undermining the principles of democracy. And is that members of the public, members of the public become elected, remain members of the public, and then do the public's business in public. And this is just such a core part of how we can get things done. If they're abandoning it, it's really for short-term political purposes. They want to hide what they're doing, and they're thinking about the next election cycle. They're not thinking about public service, and we're really missing a public service mentality from these people. It's a big part of why I'm running.
I'm going to send you an article. I don't want to discuss it now. We don't have time, but it's on co-governance. And it's on how local governments can run their cities in conjunction with the people. I sent this to Kim Roney. Can I ask who you're supporting for mayor? Do you tell people?
Yeah, I'm supporting Kim for mayor. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So now back to the homeless question, because you're so good at mediating between two conflicting opinions. There's two legitimate opinions. Now, I side with one. I side with the people that are compassionate about the homeless, that don't think they're, homeless on purpose, or they're idle and they're just panhandling because they don't want to work. The same thing with people who suffer from substance use disorders. I just watched Dope Sick. I understand how even when your body gets clean of it, your mind still isn't. It's extremely hard to get clean off of drugs. So I tend to take the compassionate view. I don't think they should be swept from the streets. I don't think their possessions should be taken. I don't think they should be put in jail or run out of town. But then you have, and you see this a lot in the paper, people who are liberals, but they're also small business owners. And they say, look, homeless people are setting up camp in front of my store. They're sleeping on the steps. All their trash is there. You see neighbors of the Ramada Inn saying, look, my kids are looking at open drug use. They're seeing dirty needles in the ground. They're seeing people urinating and defecating on our lawns. We think that these problems are intractable, but we just don't want them here. How do you navigate those two very kind of differing opinions on the homeless? What do you think the solutions are, in as much as a local government can provide that solution?
Yeah, thanks for that context, because it is basically the federal and the state level have just like thrown up their hands to this problem. They've defunded all the solutions that used to help prevent people from becoming homeless, and I shouldn't say all of them, but drastically defunded and undermined those types of programs, especially in a state like North Carolina with a Republican legislature that's very pro-business and very anti-everybody else. When I hear people in these neighborhoods talk about it, I really do feel for them, because I trust that when I hear their feelings, I trust that they're reporting their feelings accurately. I don't always join them in the solutions that they're asking for, because they tend to be solutions that the outcome of it is pushing the problem into another neighborhood. And so when I'm thinking long-term about representing the entire city of Asheville, I don't get to pick which neighborhoods I represent. I'd be representing all of them. And I do know that, being around people that are in desperate situation in life, people without access to bathrooms, people without access to weekly trash pickup like I have, because I live in a house. People without access to the things that to these things, they do create trash. They are humans. They will go to the bathroom someplace. So I feel deeply that the issue of homelessness creates real quality of life issues for neighbors. So I hear them when they talk about that. But where I can't join them is just to do the thing that we've done again and again, which is to move the problem someplace else, move these people someplace else. The people continue to exist. We need to recognize that we need to help these people individually get out of whatever situation that has led them to this point. And I mean, if there's 500 homeless people in Asheville, there's 500 solutions.
Yeah. What do you think about safe camping? Because I heard Esther Mannheimer say she looked into it. I think she said Michigan. Mm-hmm. She doesn't like it. I know that Kim Roney does like it. I've been looking into it. And I think that it can be done. There, a lot of homeless people don't want to be in a shelter because A, they have to be drug free. They can't be. B, it's got a religious theme. They don't want that. C, they can't bring their pets in there and they need their pets for emotional support. D, women get raped in shelters. That's why they have some women only shelters. And safe camping, they can have like tent. You can do tents. You can do these small little sheds for very little cost. You could put a solar panel on them to provide, electricity to plug in their phone or maybe a hot pot or something that you can have meals, you can have security, you can have services come. I think it's a great idea, and I don't understand why so many of the current council is against it. What do you think?
Well, so far where we've seen camping occur has been where it's really ignited the most opposition is in parks. And neighbors around those parks feel like they lose their park. And parks should be for everybody. The parks should not be just for one type of person, whether you're a property owner or whether you're homeless. The parks really do need to be for everybody. But there's other city land that isn't parks.
Yeah, other city land.
And this is a real sensitive issue, and it would have to certainly be done on a site by site basis. But there's so clearly a need for it that we have to take this opportunity.
Yeah.
But this is a very difficult issue. And the other fear I know that people have is that then we will attract more people. The better we treat people, then we'll attract more of the problem.
It's not how it works.
And I see this, but it's like, if I can't fail to do my part here in Asheville just because someone is failing to do their part in Fayetteville. Yes, will it take every city government, working on their own seriously to work on the problem? Absolutely. I'm willing to do the Asheville part of it because I'm here in Asheville and I'm asking to be sent to leadership here in Asheville.
Yeah.
And but that does not does not take away the responsibility that a leader has to all their constituents, whether those constituents own a home, whether they pay rent in a home, or whether they don't have either of those things.
Yeah.
So I did hear somebody call into public comment back in December, and they said, you need to be caring about your constituents, not the homeless people. The homeless folks are our constituents too. I've been pretty close to it before. I've had a lot of friends that have spent time homeless. I know that there are a lot of LGBTQ folks when they leave their family, perhaps under bad circumstances because of who they are and their identity, become homeless. This is a big issue.
And when the rents increase, there was an article I remember reading in the LA Times a few years ago that they said if the rents go up another 5%, that's 2,000 more people out in the street. And we know that the rents have increased in Asheville just last year, 25%. People can't afford housing. So many of them.
And I have heard elected folks, I'm not going to tell their names right now. I have heard elected folks say that they don't think that the price of housing and homelessness are related.
That's crazy.
Can you believe that? I couldn't believe when I heard it.
Yeah.
They obviously don't know very many people who rent.
Yeah.
It's the affordable housing is not an abstraction to me. It's something I think about at the end of every month. Now
let's talk about the other issue of development. A lot of people, are saying Asheville is getting overdevelopment. We want to be, like I'm thinking specifically about, the people that think it's the tourists that are coming in because they're causing all these hotels to be built and they're causing all this traffic and they're causing all these people to take long-term rental units and turn them into short-term Airbnbs. I mean, all this is happening, not just in Asheville, but in lots of parts of the country. And they're saying, we want to keep Asheville for the locals. But I know on the other hand, there's small business owners that depend as much on tourists for their livelihoods as they do on locals. So there's a kind of balancing act that has to be held there. So I wanted to ask you about two specific issues. One, where did you stand on the Charlotte Street development last year? Because they were saying, look, we've got some historic houses here. They're providing deeply affordable housing. We've got a lot of ancient trees, and we're going to cut them down and build one of these, faceless buildings that is so ugly with so many units. Where do you feel about development, more infill development, road diets, bike lanes, the whole 9 yards with development, and also talk about the Tourism Development Authority? Like, do you feel that the formula should be changed? Because apparently they have to spend 75% on marketing, and they're saying we don't need more marketing. We've already got more tourists than we can handle. So what's your thought on that?
Well, that's a lot. And you've related two really big questions into one question, which I appreciate because they are fundamentally linked. But let's talk about one before the other. I work for Lazoom Tours, the Purple Bus Company. I'm a tour guide. I work in tourism. I do not work for tourism. That is a fundamental difference between me and the existing political leadership that we've seen. I know that as a worker, a lot of the dollars that I make come from a tourist pocket. As a musician, I know that a lot of the dollars I make come from a tourist pocket. I understand the issue as a worker. I'm also an economics major. I understand the pressures on development that the potential profits put on developers. It is very tempting when you realize that you can double a dollar quicker by building things for tourists than building what we need locally.
Yeah.
And the economics of tourism, of development, is going to lead developers to build for tourists and not for us. I also want to recognize that this is not a new problem to Asheville. This is a historic problem in Asheville. And we have historically always chosen to be on the side of the tourist as far as development goes. And now it's grown so fast, so quickly in the past 15 years because of the TDA, the Tourism Development Authority. So what the TDA right now is, by law, this is a state law, not a local law, 75% of the money that they gather, which this year projected the whole piece of the pie is supposed to be $40 million, more than $40 million in room tax money. And 30 million of it, 75% by law, must be spent outside of Buncombe County. 25% of it must be spent in Buncombe County on projects that promote tourism. Not allowed to do anything else. We have the worst deal in the state. There's a lot of TDAs, tourism development authorities, in other counties. New Hanover County has one that's really interesting. Part of their money a little bit of their money goes to advertising and promotion, and a big chunk goes to support their civic center in New Hanover County. Another big chunk goes to support efforts to fight beach erosion. That's money that stayed there, that's working on public projects and causes. You could say that the tourists and the locals both want to use the civic center, so that's a place of common ground where you can find something like that. But we've got the worst TDA in the state, and a couple years ago I thought that we could reform them, and I sat down in a working group on a project they were doing, and I walked away from that working group, wrote an angry letter, published it, and said, after working with y'all, I believe in abolishing the TDA. I don't think that they are a salvageable entity. And the problem with them is that it's public money that they're spending. $40 million that they have is public money. And when they promote tourism as hard as they do, it puts the pressure on us locals incredibly. And then other government institutions have to deal with those problems, have to actually pay for the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And it's on us local taxpayers to take care of the cost. We've seen this in our entire country, right? Privatize the benefits, socialize the costs. Mm-hmm. This is a prime example of that. And these folks are unaccountable. They are not elected, they're appointed, and by law, most of them must be hoteliers. The entire thing is structured for the locals to get screwed. And that's exactly what's happened. The TDA came from 1983. Democratic Senator Martin Nesbitt, stepfather to Chad Nesbitt, incidentally, introduced the TDA legislation in 1983. The businesses at the time, the State Hospitality Association at the time, fought it because they thought that a 2% tax on hotel rooms would lower business. Boy, were they wrong. They got it wrong. The first slogan of the TDA is see it before it's gone, Asheville, 1984.
Wow, that was prophetic, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I've got the ad. The phone number still works. It calls the TDA to this day.
Well, what do you think you can do? And the history is interesting, but what do you think you can do on the local level if the state is in control of this? The existence of the TDA, the split of the money. Do you have any say in how the rest of the money is spent that could be helpful?
Well, one thing you can do is stop appointing members to the TDA. The city is the one that has to appoint these members. I would just not appoint. I would stop appointing them. Just drive them.
Boycott the TDA, in other words.
Sorry.
Like boycott the TDA.
Well, yeah. They when these folks that sit on the TDA board, that when their term is up, just not replace them. That's one thing you can do. That'll get some attention. But other than that, it's like, I want to join the community. I think your political leadership should be joining the chorus of the community that's saying abolish the TDA. Yeah. And keep the money at home. We shouldn't get rid of the tax. Let me be clear about that. We should not get rid of the tax. Tourists should be paying the tax, but hoteliers should not be spending it. We should be spending it as the public to solve local problems.
Okay. 3 more issues that I want to talk to you about, and then I want to talk about your campaign. You mentioned before policing and public safety. That's another one of those issues where you see two sides. Mm-hmm. Now, I am for defunding the police, although I don't like that slogan because I don't think it really says what it means, which is not so much defunding as reallocating the money. For instance, you shouldn't have a police officer with a gun go to a call where there's a mentally ill person that's having a fit or whatever. You send a trained psychologist. You shouldn't have, police officers with guns pulling over people for broken taillights. You have a civilian traffic official. And this, would save so many of these officer-involved shootings and murders, pretty much. But I do think that, you do need police for violent crime. And there are a lot of people who, are writing on nextdoor.com. I'm in a lot of places to find out what the community is thinking. And especially on Nextdoor, you're reading about crimes all the time. People stealing catalytic converters, people stealing packages off of people's front lawns, people lurking around, trespassing, not necessarily committing a crime, but there was just something today about a truck that was dangerously in the road, and the police said, "Oh, we can't get to it till tomorrow." The Asheville police has been defunded, not intentionally, but by attrition, because of the low salaries, because they figure, why do I have to deal with this shit? That they felt it was shit with the George Floyd protests 2 years ago. They're not paying me enough to deal with this. Whatever. They don't have, and the police listed a whole thing, a whole series of crimes that they are not prioritizing because they don't have the funding. So do you think that the police budget...
They have the funding. Let's be clear. They still have the funding.
Well, it's how they're allocating it then?
Well, no, I just meant to say, like, the police budget is fully funded currently.
But they can't hire the people.
Right. Yeah, they're not fully staffed.
Right. Okay. So where do you stand on all that? Do you think they're getting enough money, too much money, too little money? Do you think they should raise the salaries so they can get better qualified people? I mean, where are you on this issue?
Well, I think that we haven't, we have not built any other social programs to deal with these problems other than a police department for decades. Essentially, we haven't built anything near to the size of the police department, and the police department has been very politically adept. They are political people. The leadership is. And just like the Air Force will never say they need less bombers. The police will never say they need less police, ever. So we need to be actually looking at what tools are generating what public safety outcomes. The police, even fully staffed, haven't generated the public safety outcomes that I think we should expect from the city. Mm-hmm. So I look at this as a taxpayer issue because we are not funding efficient tools that can actually work on the problem. The police do not do a very good job of crime prevention. No. Especially the number one public safety tool, by the way, is trust. And the police departments across this nation have broken trust with citizens everywhere. They have destroyed their best tool for public safety. And political leadership has allowed them to get away with it because they keep feeding the budgets for decades. And so this is a big structural problem. And when we need to think, when we're deciding how to allocate money, is it going to go to a police department? Is it going to go to a social worker? Is it going to go to this or that? We need to be asking the question, is this money going to be generating the public safety outcomes that we should expect as taxpayers? Yeah. And I think that if you ask the police department to show that they're generating these outcomes, and then you ask the social worker to say, are you generating these outcomes? Are you helping? I think that the social workers are going to be a better way to spend taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. Plus, a lot of these crimes are because of people stealing, maybe to buy food, people stealing to feed a drug habit. Who knows? And those are those other solutions that we talked about before that maybe go beyond what the city is able to do. You're wearing a shirt that says Black Wall Street. Maybe tell the viewers what Black Wall Street is here in Asheville, and your position on some racial justice issues. There's been a lot. I mean, I've moved here, like I say, a year ago. I've seen these reports on reparations. They voted, Asheville was in the news a couple of years ago, first city to support reparations, but there hasn't been really anything done except for these studies and committees. And I want to know where you stand on that.
So first up, Black Wall Street is traditionally thought of as being in Tulsa, Oklahoma. as that's sort of the big Black Wall Street. But in recent years, local cities and black entrepreneurship have really taken this term and run with it. And locally, the Grind Coffee House, just down the street from me, on Depot Street. I live on Klingman. That's on Depot Street. Has really run with this idea, and they've been doing a great job of fostering Black entrepreneurship here in Asheville. And so I was like, I want to support them on the shirt today. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Reparations is, I was just answering a questionnaire from the Asheville Citizen Times today. They said, what do you think about reparations? Or what would you do with reparations? Well, the first thing I do is listen, because we just appointed a reparations commission and they're doing their work right now. And I don't want to interfere or get ahead of what they're doing right now. What I observe though, as a student of Asheville's history, is that much of the sins of the city of Asheville government against the Black population of Asheville have involved the taking of land, and have involved the denial of opportunity and the deprivation of dignity. And so I think obviously when you look at that history, that's going to point to the things that the reparations commissions are probably going to talk about. But as a white person, it's really up to me to listen and support.
Okay. Now, the last issue that I wanted to bring up was education, public education, because I've been an advocate of fighting charter schools and the privatization of public education for 10 years now. And I moved here, and the first thing that I covered, the first protest that I live streamed, was a protest outside of the school board about closing down the Asheville primary school. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to recount, I did a whole show on that, so I don't want to recount, the whole history of that, but their protests seemed to work. They got the school saved. And then, very similar to Kathy Ball leaving, Jackie McCarg left the school board. And the new school board, after making promises they were not going to close Asheville Primary, they closed it. And I got to hear from all the families and learned about, how the school district is being mismanaged, that they've blown through their budget. They don't have the proper amount of money on reserve. They're closing schools. And yet the central office is bloated. They've got more administrators. And this is with Asheville getting the most money per pupil as any school district in the state, by the way. And, you have an appointed board, which I know that there was just a vote in the state to make it an elected board. And a lot of people think that, everything is going to be solved when we elect the board. I don't necessarily know that that's true. There are other people that are saying, you know what, it's just beyond hope. Let's just merge with Buncombe County School District. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I'm going to stand with the teachers. I think that the teachers, rather than administration, have the school administration has obviously fumbled on this. They have not led very well. And so we're going to have to look elsewhere for solutions. The teachers are very upset about this. And even though, I was homeschooled, we talked about it first, but I believe deeply in public education. My life would have been probably very, very different had I been allowed to go to public school. So everyone should deserve a great public education. I want to be clear about that. But the teachers endorsed during the last appointment process. The teachers endorsed folks to be appointed there.
Yeah.
And because they trusted these folks, they thought they had the community's best interest at heart. They thought they had the kids' best interest at heart, and they thought they had the teachers' best interest at heart. And the appointed school board and their new member, who was not endorsed by the teachers, ignored all of their concerns. And it was due to city council. City council played some weird inside baseball.
Yep.
And they didn't listen to the teachers. They ignored the teachers. And then the school that everybody fought for is getting closed anyway.
Yeah.
So city council clearly cannot be trusted with that appointment process. They broke that trust with the community, in my opinion. They can't be trusted with it. I think that the school board election, we're in the middle of May 17th is the election. That's their primary too, just like mine, and the city council race. Obviously, the existing leadership of the school board needs to be disrupted. An election is the soonest best chance that we can do that. So I think it's a very positive step. I'll wait to see how that goes before I judge it.
Okay, so you're not necessarily saying it's beyond hope, let's merge with Buncombe County School District.
I have not heard a large number of voices say that. I have heard that here and there, but I'm not sure that that's a panacea either. It does seem like such a leadership problem. If we get a change in leadership from appointed to elected, I think that should have a pretty good chance. It's worth the risk of going that way. It's already in process, and so I think that hopefully will be the quickest help that we can get our kids and families that really need a great public education here in Asheville.
Well, we've reached the end of our hour, Andrew, and I really enjoyed talking with you. Why don't you tell viewers who may want to volunteer or donate to your campaign how they can find you? You don't have a website.
No, not yet. It's under construction. All the things to run a campaign, and the website is just that thing that can't quite get off the ground. You can donate by going to donate.fletcherforasheville.com. And so that's one way to do it. And also, I've got an announcement to make too. We are doing a big Get Out the Vote campaign, a party, basically. It's going to be at the Asheville Music Hall on April 28th. And I'm going to have a lot of my friends from the music industry, names you're going to know. I'm not ready to announce the names yet. We're going to have myself and 3 other candidates confirmed that are going to be there speaking. I've invited the Sunrise movement to send a speaker. And so you're going to get to learn more about me on that date. You're going to hit some great local music, and it's the first day of early voting. So there will be a bus that can take you from the show to the polls and back, and there will be entertainment on the bus. So we're going to make voting fun again. We're going to get a great turnout on April 28th. Early voting goes all the way to May 14th. If you want to find out more about my campaign, the best place right now is on Facebook or Instagram. Andrew Fletcher for Asheville will take you there. Please pay attention to local elections, y'all. It really, really matters. The reason that somebody like me is not running for Congress or for or at the state level is because I believe in doing what I can right here in Asheville, and my arms are only so long.
Right.
But so that's really what I'm doing. I'm an independent and a progressive, and I'm asking for your support.
Yeah. By the way, are you refusing developer money and real estate money?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Those people aren't going to give me their money. They heard what I have to say. Right.
Okay. Well, I want to let viewers know, if this is the first time you've watched me, that I also broadcast live. I don't know if you're watching me on YouTube or Facebook, but I do this show live on Facebook and YouTube. And I can be subscribed to on YouTube, followed here on Facebook, and also followed on Twitter at Lauren_Steiner. My next interview in this series is going to be Wednesday at 1 o'clock. I was hoping to do it at a nighttime, but I couldn't get all 3 of these ladies at any single night between now and the election. So it's going to be for Senate District 49 with Julie Mayfield, Taylor Breeden, and Sandra. I just blanked on her. Kilgore, yes. 1 o'clock on Wednesday. Then Thursday night on 7 o'clock, I'm going to be interviewing Nina Tovish. And then next week, I forget, I got to look it up. I'm going to be interviewing Allison Scott, who's also running for city council. And I'm going to try to line up some other interviews. I've got Courtney Booth, who's running for district attorney. And Allison is going to be Monday night, the 18th at 8 p.m. And I want to interview progressive candidates. I'm not going to be able to get to all the candidates, but I'm going to interview, I think, the ones that I think are the most progressives with the most participatory solutions, as you have described tonight. You've taught me a lot of things, Andrew. So I hope people share this show. And I'm not saying who I'm endorsing, but you can obviously tell whose ideas I like. So thank you very much, and keep fighting.
Thanks, Lauren.